Now, we've spent our previous sessions looking at how to map out value and spot waste in an organization. But the big question we face today is, what do you actually do once you locate a broken, highly inefficient process? As we know, there are no shortcuts in management accounting. We need a rigorous, structured approach to fixing these issues, and that is exactly what we are going to master right now.
Here is the syllabus for today's explainer. We'll be covering the BPI triad, diagnostic, surgery, recovery, and finally, acing your CMA exam.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the BPI triad, diagnostic, surgery, and recovery.
Look, we can't just wave a magic wand to fix operational inefficiencies. I wish we could. But instead, we have to treat process improvement like a highly disciplined medical intervention. Let's look at this continuous three-step loop. The ICMA heavily tests these three pillars of workflow optimization: process analysis, process redesign, and process standardization. You can really think of these as the diagnostic, surgery, and recovery phases of management accounting. It's so important to understand how these phases work together dynamically to tackle scenario-based questions. They aren't just isolated events, they feed directly into one another.
Moving into Section 2, diagnostic, analyzing the as-is. Basically, what is actually happening?
So, before making a single change, we must carefully examine the current state of affairs. We need to ask what is actually happening out there on the factory floor or in the back office. This is our as-is process. Notice the emphasis on gathered data here. As management accountants, we never ever guess. We rely on hard data to diagnose exactly where the illness lives within that as-is process. We're actively hunting for those specific bottlenecks, delays, and areas of excess cost.
Now, you're definitely going to want to look out for these three core tools on your exam because they help you visually trace workflows, dig past the symptoms, and measure cycle times. First up, process mapping or flowcharting. This is where you literally visually trace a document, product, or service from start to finish just to see those unnecessary handoffs or confusing loops. Second is root cause analysis, which is often called the 5 whys. This brilliantly illustrates how we dig past surface-level symptoms. For example, if a machine keeps breaking down, we don't just fix the machine, right? We ask why over and over until we find out that a preventative maintenance schedule was completely skipped. Finally, we use capacity and throughput analysis to measure cycle times and identify the strict bottlenecks slowing down the whole production line.
And that brings us to this crucial takeaway. You simply cannot redesign a process effectively if you haven't thoroughly analyzed the as-is state first. Let me give you a vital exam tip as your professor. Test writers absolutely love to trick you into jumping straight to solutions before the problem is fully diagnosed. You've got to analyze first. Do not take the bait when a multiple-choice question offers a shiny new software solution before the root cause has actually been identified.
Which brings us to Section 3, surgery, redesigning the 2B. It is time to rethink the workflow.
Okay, you've successfully diagnosed the operational illness. Now, it's time for surgery. We're taking an as-is process that is complex, fragmented, and likely bleeding money and transforming it into our ultimate goal, a streamlined, integrated workflow. Process redesign is fundamentally about rethinking how work is done to achieve dramatic improvements in cost, quality, and speed. We aren't looking for a 1% improvement here, folks. We are completely reinventing the workflow. When tackling redesign questions on the exam, you'll want to keep these classic surgical strategies in mind. First is simplification. This means aggressively eliminating non-value-added steps. Think about getting rid of duplicate management approvals that just bog things down. Next is linear formatting, which is smoothing out confusing circular loops into straight sequential lines. Then we have automation, where we introduce tech to handle repetitive, low-value human tasks, like automated invoice matching. And finally, parallel processing. This is changing a process so that two steps can happen at the exact same time, rather than waiting for one to finish before starting the next.
But let's zoom out for a second. How does this build into the bigger picture? Redesign isn't just about making tiny tweaks. It is a major intervention meant to align the entire workflow with the broader strategic goals of the company. If your company's strategy is to be the absolute fastest delivery service in the market, well, your process redesign must mathematically support that speed. Every surgical cut you make to the process has to serve that strategic master plan.
All right, moving to Section 4, Recovery, Process Standardization, locking in the gains.
Here is the thing about human nature. If you design a brilliant new process and simply walk away, employees will inevitably drift right back to their old comfortable habits. It just happens. And that drift is exactly why our recovery phase, process standardization, is so crucial for locking in the gains of your hard work. Standardization is the act of documenting and establishing the new best practice so that everyone, and I mean everyone, performs the task the exact same way every single time. If we don't lock this in, all that time we spent analyzing and redesigning is pretty much totally wasted.
So to make these new processes actually stick, organizations rely on a few critical tools. First, standard operating procedures, or SOPs. These are your clear, written, step-by-step instructions. Second, we use visual controls. Think of color-coded charts, dashboards, or maybe brightly colored floor markings in a warehouse that highlight deviations instantly so managers can spot errors from 50 feet away. And third, robust training programs to ensure full employee alignment. Everyone needs to understand not just how to do the new process, but why it actually matters.
Putting on our CMA hats, standardization is really all about one thing: reducing variance. High variance naturally leads to unpredictable expenses and defects, but through standardization, we achieve predictable costs and high quality. Less variance translates directly into an easier environment to audit, much tighter budget controls, and ultimately, a way healthier bottom line for the whole company.
Let's wrap things up with Section 5, Acing Your CMA Exam, the logical flow.
Let's bring this whole shebang together so you absolutely crush this topic on exam day. To succeed, you have got to master this logical sequence flowing in one direction. Step 1. Analyze the as-is to find the bottleneck and diagnose the root cause. Step 2. Redesign the to-be to strip out waste, automate, and add speed. And Step 3. Standardize the new method to sustain those newly achieved cost savings and quality improvements. If you can keep this order straight in your head, you're going to be able to navigate even the trickiest scenario questions the ICMA throws your way.
So, if a scenario asks you what a manager should do before purchasing new workflow software, well, you now know the answer involves thoroughly analyzing the as-is state first. But I want to leave you with the question to chew on. What happens when your beautiful 2B surgery completely fails because your team outright rejects the new standardization? How do you manage the human element of change? Think about that as you continue your studies, keep up the fantastic effort, and I will see you in our next explainer where we tackle total quality management.